Good morning, children. Sairam. My name is Ajay Maheshwari. I am your economics teacher, and I again welcome you all to the online classes of economics of Bhagirathi Vidyalaya. Dear children, today I am going to start the third chapter of our book. The name of our chapter is National Income and Related Aggregates. In the previous video, we have already finished up our chapter number 2, that was some basic concepts of macroeconomics, where we have successfully learned some of the most important topics like what are final goods and what are final goods and intermediate goods, what are consumer goods and capital goods, and what are stock inflows, the four sectors of the economy, intersectoral dependence among the various sectors, thereafter real flow and money flow, and at very last we have learned a circular flow of income. So just to take ahead this unit, I am going to start the third chapter today. The name of our chapter is National Income and Related Aggregates. So the topic what we are covering today is the concept of national income, domestic and national concepts of income, gross and net concept of domestic product and market price and at a factor cost, aggregates related to national income, nominal and real GDP, and at very last we will learn GDP and welfare. So dear children, let's going to start our topic. I'm going to start with my first topic, that is concept of national income. Now what is national income, dear children? National income is the sum total of factors income earned by the normal residents of a country during the period of 1 year, or you can also define as national income in another way. National income is also defined as the sum total of a market value of all the final goods and services produced by the normal residents of a country in 1 year. So just to give a clear explanation on this topic, let us learn first the various estimation of national income in the last few years. So dear children, when we are going to learn the estimation of national income in India, the whole estimation can be briefly understood in these three various categories. The first category is pre-independence estimates. I mean, before the advent of the Britishers, how we are calculating a national income, then during the independence, and at last we will learn the post-independence estimation. So in pre-independence estimation of national income, I mean before the country's independence, dear children, there was no central authority or the government organization in India who could prepare the national income estimates. So certain important or different citizens and economists made some of their own estimation of national income at their own personal level, and their estimation could not be considered as a scientific method. Their estimations will be was considered as the non-scientific method. So here there are the various estimations of national income and the per capita income of India. First, Dadabhai Nauroji, the great old man of our country, has estimated the national income in the year 1867 to 68, and according to him 340 crores was the national income of a country, and the per capita income is only rupees 20. Thereafter, dear children, Wadia and Joshi, Shah and Gambetta, V.K.R.V. Rao, as well as the Ministry of the Commerce, that is the Government of India, has estimated the national income in different time span. So you just see the slide, you will better understood when was the various estimation of national income took place in a country. So now, as I just said, Dadabhai Nauroji, Shah and Gambetta, Wadia and Joshi and certain other peoples have first estimated the value of agricultural production. The various estimation of this particular person was considered as the non-scientific method of conducting or estimating the national income, because they have included a few part of agricultural production. I mean, they have only included either the few part of agricultural production or only the agricultural production, but they have not included the industrial sector for their estimation. That is why it is not giving us any meaningful explanation of the national income. That is why their estimation will be considered as the non-scientific method. And Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao, what I am going to explain you, Dadabhai Naoroji's estimation, Shah and Gambetter's estimation, these all various estimations done by these peoples of estimating the national income was considered as the non-scientific method. But the first scientific method of conducting the national income was completed by Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao. He was the first person to adopt a scientific procedure for the estimation of the national income in the year 1931. He divided the entire economy into two parts. The first part is your agriculture and second part is the corporate sector. In agriculture sector has included agriculture, forest, fishing, hunting, animal husbandry, horticulture, whereas in corporate sector he has included industries, construction, transport and public services. So his estimation was considered as a scientific method. And after the country's independence, dear children, the government of India has appointed a national income committee in the year 1949 under the chairmanship of Professor P.C. Mahalanobis. P.C. Mahalanobis was the person who was known as the president of a finance commission. So under his guidelines, the various estimation of national income took place. This committee has presented its first report in the year 1951 and he has calculated the national income for the year 1948 to 49, which was 8,710 crores and the per capita income was only rupees 225. So this was the committee which was being inaugurated after the country's independence, and this committee has presented its first report of estimating the national income, taking 1948 and 49 as the conducting year. But at present, dear children, the estimation of national income in India is prepared by Central Statistical Organization, CSO. CSO is a body, is an organization who is estimating the national income in a country, and it is also known as National Account Statistics. Now children, with this slide again, I am come back with the definition of national income. So national income is the sum total of factors income earned by the normal residents of a country during the period of 1 year. When we look about this definition, there are two important points which we have to be understood well. First, national income includes only the factors income. I mean, national income includes factors income only, and national income includes income of only the normal residents of a country. These are the two important points which we should understand it well. Now let us learn what is factor income. What is factor income, dear children? In a very simple language or in a very simple understanding, we can say that factor income refers to the income received on factors of production. Now here is factors of production. What are the factors of the production, dear children? In the previous video, when I am explaining you the various circular flows of income, where I have explained you the real flow and money flow, I have explained you the factors of production. So dear children, there are 4 factors of production, the 4 FOPs. First is land, labor, capital, entrepreneur. On the left hand side, I have kept the factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, whereas on the right hand side I have kept factor income. Now what is factor income? Dear children, factor incomes, I'm again recall, factor incomes are the payments made by the producing units, that is firm, to the household owners of the factors of production for the use of their factor services. I have already explained you, a household is considered as the owners of the factors of production, whereas a household give their factor services to the firm, and firm has to make them payment in the form of goods and services, which is known as the real flow, and in the form of money, which we call it money flow. So factor income or the factor payments are broadly classified into some of the very important points. Now here one thing I want to explain it again, I want to clarify here. When I'm going to look the factor income, this factor's income on behalf of household, then it is known as factor income. But when this land, labor, capital, entrepreneur, this factors income, what they are giving is like rent, interest, wages and profit. When this rent, interest, wages and profit we are looking on behalf of household, then it is known as the factor income. But when this things we will look on behalf of you can say firms, then these are known as factor payment. But both means same. If we look as per the household, they are known as factor income, but if we look on behalf of firms, then they are known as factor payment. Now what are factor payment, factor income, dear children? This I have just explained you. These are the factors of production: land, labor, capital, entrepreneur. So I have explained you the factor incomes are broadly categorized into the four basic points. The first is your compensation of employees. Dear children, compensation of employees can be understood with this slide. Compensation of employees. Compensation of employees refers to the income received by the household for rendering their services as employee in the producing unit. I mean the labor can be classified into two ways, as we are watching in the slide. Labor can be called as skilled labor, or it can be called as unskilled labor. If it is a skilled labor, is getting definitely the salary from the firm, but if it is an unskilled labor, it is then the household will get the wages. So the salary and wages is known as the compensation of employees. So the first you can say the classification of factor income is the compensation of employees, where household is getting the salaries or is getting wages from the firms for rendering their services as employees or as the workers in the producing units. Now second is dear children, land. So second factor income is yours rent. Rent, dear children, rent received by the household for use of their land for the producing unit is also the second factor income. I mean household is giving their land or is giving their own building for the producing unit, and producer or the firm is paying them the payment. So if the firms are making the factor payment to household, it becomes the factor's income. So second factor income is the rental income. Now third is capital. On behalf of capital of household is getting interest. So interest received by the household for use of their capital by the producing unit is known as the factor income, and this is the third classification of factor income. And at last, fourth is the entrepreneur. Entrepreneur, you can say that a profit received by the household for the use of their entrepreneur skills for the producing unit is the fourth classification of factor income. So there are four basic factors of production, that is land, labor, capital and entrepreneur, and on behalf of this factor of production of household is getting factors income, that is compensation of employees, the rent, interest and profit. Now let us move ahead, dear children. Now we just look with the slide, it is factor income and transfer income. As I have just explained you, factors income refers to the income received by the factors of production for rendering their factor services. Factors income of normal residents of a country is included in national income. What are the factors income? That is compensation of employees, or you can say wages and salaries, rent, interest and profit. Now it may be noted that factors income are quite different from the transfers income. What are transfer income, dear children? Transfer income refers to those income which are received by a person as a help, donation or a charity. It is transfer income are known as unearned income because it does not reflect any factors of production. So when we guys are calculating or estimating the national income, the one thing we should be understood that in estimating the national income we will only include the factor income. We are not going to include the transfer income in estimating the national income. So dear children, factor income of normal residents of a country is included in the estimating a national income, whereas a transfer income is only a one-sided concept. It is known as a unilateral concept. It does not include in national income, and some of the examples of transfer incomes are old age pension, scholarship, unemployment allowances, tax received by the government, scholarship. These all are the factors income. So dear children, the first important points of the definition of national income I have completed. That was national income includes only the factors income. Now I am going to explaining you the second important point of the definition of national income. That was national income includes income of only the normal residents of a country. Now let us learn what is the normal residents of a country and who is known as the normal residents of a country. So children, a normal residents of a country is said to be one who ordinarily resides in a country is concerned and whose center of economic interest also lies in that country. Now there are two observations basically with the definition of this normal resident. The first is a person residing in a country for a period of 1 year or more is taken as ordinary resident in that country. This person may or may not be the citizen of that country. I mean, in a country, if any person is living more than 1 year, then that person is known as the normal residents of a country. A person is said to have his economic interest also in that country when he carries out all his economic activities such as production, consumption and investment in that country. So that particular person is having their economic interest with the same country. I mean, if he is living more than for 1 year and all his consumption, production, investment is also with that country, then it is known as the normal resident. So with the slide, dear children, there is a little bit explanation between the normal residents of a country and the non-residents of a country. The first point explain on the left hand side we are watching here the normal residents of a country, and on right side we are watching the non-residents of a country, I mean NRI. So dear children, Indian workers, if they are working in the foreign embassies in India, they are known as the normal residents of a country, because these people, those who are working in the foreign embassies are Indians and they are living in India itself, No problem, no issues whether they are working with the foreign countries, the foreign embassies. Sorry, no matters whether they are working with the foreign embassies, but they all are called as the normal residents of a country. Same as if we look about for NRI, I mean non-residents of India, foreigners working in Indian embassy in Canada or Japan. If there is any embassy of India in Canada or Japan, then the Indian embassy which is situated in Canada or Japan, this Canada and Japan, I am taking a rough example. Suppose if any Indian embassy is located abroad or it is outside the country, then it is part of domestic territory of a country. So if any foreigners are working in Indian embassy, then they are not considered as the normal resident of India, but they are known as the non-resident of India. Understood? Now second point, Indians employed in World Health Organization located in India. If there is any WHO office, in India, if any Indians are working in that particular organization, they all peoples are known as the normal resident of India. But if any foreigners are working in WHO, I mean World Health Organization, which is again located in India, then the foreigners will not consider as the normal resident. They are considered as the non-residents of our country, I mean of India. Same as the local people working in the Office of International Monetary Fund in India. If there is any to be in a very simple language, I can explain that if there is any foreign offices which is located in a country India, if any Indians are working in that particular offices, in that particular embassies, in that particular organization, they all peoples are known as normal resident of a country. But if foreigners are working in that particular organizations, then they are called as the NRI, I mean non-residents of India. They will not consider as the normal resident of a country. Ambassadors for India in rest of the world. If there is an Indian ambassador is living in any other country, as you all must be knowing, in every country we have an ambassador, the consulates of other countries. Like in a country India, there are we have the embassies of all the countries. So this embassies which is located in a country is not a part of a country. It is basically the domestic territory of that country of where it belongs. Similarly, if there is our Indian embassy is also in any other countries also, on every countries also. So all the Indian embassies which is there in the rest of the world, then this Indian embassy is the domestic territory of a country, and the peoples who are working in abroad also, they are also known as the normal resident of a country. Whereas if there is any ambassador, there is any embassy in India which is from the rest of the world, then the peoples who are working with these embassies, then they are known as the non-resident of a country. So let's move ahead, dear children. Now you better understood the basic differences between the normal residents of a country and the non-residents of a country. So with this slide we will understood again the normal residents of a country. A normal resident, whether a person or an institution, is one whose center of economic interest lies in the economic territory of a country in which he lives. Citizen and residents are the two important terms. A person may be a citizen of a country, but he will not be the resident where he lives. Understood? Citizenship is a legal concept and residentship in an economic concept. I mean, a person who's living in a country for a period of 1 year or more will be the normal residents of a country, but he will not consider as the citizen of that country. If you want to be a citizen of a country, of that country, then there must be the certain rules and regulations. There may be certain legal procedure which he has to be complete with. Then only he can be the citizen of that country. Now the next thing what we are learning today is the domestic and the national concept of income. Before I am going to explain you the domestic territory of a country, the first thing I want to explain the basic concepts of domestic as well as the national income. So dear children, at the macro level, the concept of income is used for both, I mean for domestic as well as the national. When the word income is used as a domestic concept, then we called it a domestic income, and when it is used as a national concept, then we called it as a national income. So when we talk about the domestic income and national income, it must be understood that it includes the 4 basic elements of factors income. What are the 4 basic elements of factors income? First is your compensation of employees, in which the wages and salaries are including. Second is your rent. Third is your interest, and fourth is your profit. These are basically the factors income of which is known as. And now when we talk about the domestic income, what is domestic income? Domestic income is the sum total of factors income, that is compensation of employees, rent, interest and profit generated within the domestic territory of a country. No matters who generate it, whether it is generating by the normal residents or whether it is generating by the non-residents. Whereas national income is the sum total of factors income, that is compensation of employees, rent, interest and wages earned by the normal residents of a country, and it again no matters where it is generated within a country or it is generated outside the country. So here when I am explaining you this definition, there is a word which obviously repeating many times, that is domestic territory of a country. Now what is this domestic territory of a country, dear children? In a common language, the domestic territory of a country is considered as the political boundaries, the political territory of a nation. Like from east to west, north to south, whatever is the political boundaries, the geographical boundaries of a country, it is already comes in a country, and it is known as the domestic territory of a country. But in economics, it refers to the economic territory, which is much wider concept than the political economy. According to the United Nations, dear children, economic territory is the geographical territory administered by the government within which the persons, the goods or the capital can circulate freely. I mean, they don't have any kind of foundation of going or circulating from one flow from one end to another end. Like you just see from the top to down. Like on the very top we have the Himalayas, and at the very down of our country we have we have some of the states. So from east to west, whatever is the demographic or whatever is the political boundaries of a country, they all are known as the domestic territory. So if there is any kind of circulation of goods or person or a capital, then this all circulation will be done smoothly, and it is known as the economic territory of a nation. So dear children, one question I want to arise is, do we have this freedom of circulation of person, goods or capital in the embassies of the foreign countries located in a country? I mean the foreign embassies located in a country? Obviously your answers is no. If there is any embassy, the foreign embassy in a country, in India, then this foreign embassies will be the domestic territory of that country from where it belongs. It does not known as the domestic territory of India. That is why in the foreign embassies we do not have a freedom of free circulation of person, goods and capital. But the same freedom of freedom of circulation of persons, goods and thing we can entertain in Indian embassies which is located abroad or which is located is located in outside of the world. Now again I am coming back with this point, domestic territory of a country. It includes territory lying within the political frontiers, including the territorial waters of the countries. If there is any ship or aircraft which is operated by the residents of a country between the two countries, then whatever the income they are generating is a part of domestic income of a country. Like suppose there is a plane, there is a plane of Air India which takes a flight from Russia to Japan continuously, and whatever the income they are generating is included in our domestic income, because this Air India is of Indian property, it is of India, no matters whether it is taking a flying. A government is giving Air India flight to any airlines authority to take a flight from Russia and Japan. So whatever the fare, the rent they are generating, this all included in the the domestic income of a country. Similarly, if there is any plane of any foreign country, like if there is any plane of Singapore Airlines which takes a run from America to Canada, so whatever the income that plane is generating, then it is included into the domestic income of Singapore, because it is basically of a Singapore Airlines. It is obviously the property of Singapore. That is why the income what the airplane is generating will be included in the domestic income of Singapore itself. Similarly, the fishing vessels, oil and natural gas rigs, floating platform operated by the residents of a country in an international waters or engaged in extraction in areas in which the country has exclusive rights of exploitation. This all will be included in the domestic territory of a country. Embassies, consulates and military establishment of a country located abroad, whatever the income, whatever the free circulation is there, this all are including in a domestic territory of a country. Obviously this is a part of a domestic territory of a country. But if there is any embassies, consulates or military establishment in a country of any foreign country, then this we are going to be excluded in calculating the domestic territory, the domestic income of a country, because all these foreign embassies, the consulates, the military establishment are not of India and it is not in the domestic territory of a country. That is why it is excluded in calculating the domestic income. So as I just explained you, the union territory according to economic territory according to the UN, economic territory is a geographical territory administered by the government within which a person's the goods and the capital circulate freely. The definition is based on the criteria of freedom of circulation of person, goods and capital. So those parts of political frontier of a country where the country does not enjoy administration right is not included in Indian territory of that country, economic territory of that country. For example, the foreign embassies in India will be a part of respective country economic territory. Similarly, the Indian embassies in any other countries will be the part of economic territory. So I hope the basic classification of the domestic territory of a country is well understood. We have already understood the economic territory as well. Now let us move ahead with the topic domestic income and national income. So I hope children, as I have already explained you the basic classification among the economic territories, the domestic territory, everything is well clear to you now. So that's all for today, dear children. I have already have explained you the topics. What we have covered up today is the definition of the national income and the various estimation of national income in a country. Further, we have learned what is domestic income, what is domestic territory, the economic territory. So today in the next video, we guys will learn the GDP, the basic differences between domestic income and national income. What are the components of domestic income, the gross domestic product, what are the basic concepts of GDP, and further the rest of the topics we will cover up in the next video. So that's all for today, dear children. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Take care, please, and Sai Ram to all of you.